I'm not going to say I mistakenly bought it right because I didn't. I knew exactly what was in front of me. But at the time, I mean, that deal, it was off market. If it went on market, it would have never traded at the price that I bought it for.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show, let us hear about it. Leave us an honest review anywhere you listen to the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Josh Appelman. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show, let us hear about it. Leave us an honest review anywhere you listen to the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Josh Appelman.
How we doing?
Josh, I'm doing great. How about yourself today?
Doing good, doing good. It's Friday.
There you go, man. Well, listen, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, so the innovative property management is I'm an operations guy, so I love to put workflows together and make it flow. So ultimately, tenants are our customers. Property management is the operations tools. So 10,000 lives is 10,000 units through property management. If we make a successful property management operation, then ultimately that's the backbone to scaling. So we're an owner operator. We only manage our own properties. We don't do any third party property management. But that's the, in our opinion, the secret sauce to a successful real estate firm is scaling property management and all of the nuances that go in with that.
Yeah, man. We were talking before we hit record. I know you just closed on some assets, and we kind of met at a meetup here in Cincinnati, and love the fact that you're building out your own portfolio. And you talked about being an owner operator, and really focusing in on the property management aspect of the business, recognizing that these tenants, these residents, they're your customers, they're your clients. If you can serve them, you can scale and grow your business. So I love the way you are approaching it. Let's talk about just the biggest challenge I think investors are facing today, right? Which is deal flow. The market's changed, the economy's changed, interest rates, all that kind of stuff. Yet you're still out there finding deals. Talk to us about kind of, how you're able to do that and where you're sourcing these opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Right now is I consider buying in the dip. Everything is on discount at a real estate price perspective because interest rates are higher. The Fed says that inflation is higher, so the cost of everything is up, which is causing real estate prices to squeeze down. Um, Finding properties that truly pencil out with debt in place and making the equity work and with the in place rents, it's still challenging. It's challenging to find those deals, but we know where the glass ceiling is at right now for where real estate prices just came from, and they will go back to. So, I mean, if some properties are now trading 20% lower than they were, that's a discount. Pick it up in the dip and just buy for the long term. Put in plug in the best practices that you know today and sit and wait.
Yeah, I love that. I love you talking about buying at the dip, right? If you can get at a little bit of a discount from where it was, at the peak, let's just say a year ago, 2 years ago, that's how you're going in and buying some of these opportunities. Now, when you're doing that, are you, projecting, certain returns? I know when we talk about long-term investing, everyone has a different approach to that. So what are some of the metrics you kind of pay attention to when you're deciding to go ahead and buy these properties on the dip?
Yeah, we always look at the properties for their value today, intrinsic value. What are the current rents today? What is the NOI today? Not at where it would be tomorrow. We still are a firm believer that you make your money on the buying right. versus buying at a future value, like a lot of groups had already done. Um, so we're underwriting. We're underwriting for today's rents. We're putting in a big zero on rent increases over the next 3 years because we feel like things have plateaued out on where we actually feel like it's going to be going down, rent prices. Um, and that's conservative because if we're underwriting at no rent increases for the next 3 years, we'll get rents to where market says that they should be, of course. So we want to buy a property that has lower rents than they should be, and we'll get them to market, but we're not going to take them above and beyond where market price is today over the next 3 years. So we're just building the equity, and if it passes all of those check boxes and it still doesn't kill the deal, then there's a green light to go forward.
I mean, it's a great way to be conservative. You talked about not putting in those rent bumps, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're projecting 0% rent growth over the next 3 years. You're buying it based on the current performance, the current rents, the current NOI, and you're trying to, project out, hey, if it works with these numbers, then we know we've got a great opportunity, especially if, this is, 10, 15, 20% below where the value was a couple of years ago. So really a great way to build it in and be conservative. I think strategically that makes sense, right? It makes sense on paper. I think the challenge a lot of investors face is, yeah, when I go out and make those offers, there's still a disconnect between where they think the value is today and maybe where those sellers or those owners think the value is today. How are you able to kind of bridge that gap?
Well, ultimately, the sellers want certainty of closure. So if you're a closer, the brokers know that you can close and perform all the way through, then that weighs more than a price if there's a little pain point in there. And you can tell if things are painful, whether they've taken on bad debt or uh, they have bad management, that the place isn't producing enough to even cover what its current obligations are. There's a pain point somewhere. If you can find a balance point on the deal and you're the solution, then it's a win for everyone. You go into your diligence, and if you find something that's bigger than what you expected, you can certainly go back to the table and see if there's a common place to agree at. But I when I say buying and future value, we're talking about a property that we're looking at, and then the broker's telling us a property down the road has rent prices that are $200 higher. We're going to sell you this property at that property's price level because we know that the rents could be $200 higher. That's where you get in trouble because you're already at a negative cash flow on day one, and you're now relying on your property's rents to go up $200 just to go neutral leverage. It doesn't work, and it hasn't worked, and that's the way a lot of groups were purchasing in the past 2 years. It's a business ultimately that you're buying, the multifamily. To buy it right and making your money on the buy is truly buying it right, and then adding your sweat equity and renovations and increase your premiums based on the value you're adding to the property.
Yeah, Josh, you brought it back to really the fundamentals, right? Is buying right, making sure that your going in numbers make sense. I think a lot of people were buying based on maybe future projections, and maybe the property is cash flow negative out of the gate, but they felt they could get it cash flow positive with their business plan. And you're talking about buying it right, make sure the property cash flows based on the current rents. And then yes, you want to achieve that upside for yourself and your investors, right? You don't want to necessarily buy it with that baked in and then have to do all this work simply to break even. You said something earlier I thought was really telling, right? It's a really great insight. You said, yes, there is a disconnect between what sellers want and where the market is today as a buyer. But the reality is, what they really want is certainty to close. And if you are a closer, you're going to get those deals and get those opportunities. That takes time to develop that kind of reputation. Talk to us about building that reputation, putting in kind of the sweat equity and the work over the years where you can essentially build that reputation as a closer, someone who's going to deliver, someone who's going to get deals done.
Well, the key to that is the time. It takes an extraordinary amount of time in real estate. Everything comes slower in real estate. If you're, it's there's no overnight successes. What looks like success overnight is somebody spending um, morning, day, and night trying to build something up 7 days a week, and ultimately their path to success is now becoming relevant out in the marketplace. So it's not anything that takes a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's continuously showing up day over day over day on podcasts like this one, John, and getting the message out that Real estate is truly it is a great industry to be in, but it takes time. In our case, I had an operating business before we got into multifamily and real estate. I could have cared less about real estate uh, with my other business. It was all transactional, and we wanted more flow of more projects to manage. But in ultimately, real estate gives you a whole nother uh, different type of platform for scalability. It's just it's business principles. You can manage your expenses much easier with real estate than you can on a transactional business. Um, the little nuances of you don't necessarily have a marketing spend or new salespeople out there driving in new sales. It's customers there, so your scalability is there. But as far as sorry, the value add, getting back to the value add piece, my company was construction related. So we had crews already in place, management in place, staff in place. So plugging in uh, real estate, we had components that not everyone else out there would have out of the gates. So it's us going in and plugging in principles that we already had and applying what we consider best practices to make a property better based on our existing experience, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that's a great insight as well because I mean, essentially, you already had let's call it a skill set, or if you want to call it an advantage, built in because you were in a related industry, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But you were in the construction business to a degree, right? With your flooring business, so you were already kind of tied in, and you had some knowledge built in based on that. And one of the things that can help investors, particularly new investors or those looking to scale, is to lean on a thing you already have the knowledge and the experience with. You're already going into kind of a newer space, whether you're trying to scale into larger commercial or syndications or whatever it is. But if you can lean on the experience you have, whether it be from a business you were a part of, your corporate job, whatever it is, lean on that expertise, lean on that knowledge, and then you can grow and expand and leverage other team members and other folks to help you, shorten that learning curve, and it makes it a little bit easier than trying to come in from scratch and learn everything all at one time. You have that as an advantage. You talked about also, it takes time to develop that reputation, developing a reputation as a closer, working with brokers and all of that. For someone who's starting out, or maybe, they're not getting those deals today. They don't have that reputation. What are some things that you would suggest they do to slowly start to build that reputation today?
Yeah, and I started out with zero, so there was no pre-existing experience. I don't think anyone has pre-existing experience. So when I started out, it was starting from scratch, just like everyone else has to start out. And but one thing that I've always had is a drive to I'm going to say a drive to succeed, and what that gives you is a drive to learn different, get out of your comfort zone, learn, and keep showing up. I put myself through realtor school, online real estate, coming home, just going through it and learning the real estate realtor approach because I truly didn't know where to start with real estate investing. And you can learn some key concepts and points taking yourself through those motions. I had no intentions of becoming a realtor, but I had to start somewhere. I watching, trying to find YouTube channels that were relevant, trying to just connect the dots somehow. What is a DSCR? What is that? How does that correlate with even buying a property? What is a cap rate? How do I find a cap rate for a given market? All these things make zero sense when you're starting out, but it's like knowledge that keeps compounding on top of each other over the years. And you have to keep on showing up to and I say showing up, you have to keep getting the Audible books if you're on the road. You have to keep watching the YouTube channels at nighttime, not watch Netflix. Just spend as much time as you can on what you want to master, which I don't know if you can ever master anything, but what you want to become great at, and let time take its course. I mean, we're still learning strategies every single day. There's so much knowledge to be learned about just taxes because you get into tax. Not say tax problems, but ways of leveraging different strategies to become more tax efficient. Your debt strategies, what banks to talk to, what how your capital stack works on the deals to make it most effective with the best gains possible. Just different things that come over time. My rule of thumb has always been if I can't write down the next 5 moves, I need to get around somebody who can, because that means that I'm not that's bigger than my head at that point. And when it's bigger than my head, that equals potential problems. So be able to write down the next 5 moves. And once you get to that point, you're naturally progressing to where you want to find out what the bigger thing is. And then you don't know the next 5 moves on that neither.
I love it, man. You talked about really one, just hustling, just really hustling and focusing on your own education. When you don't have that experience, you got to learn it. For you, it was, getting your realtor's license, not because you wanted to be a realtor, but you needed a place to start. That seemed, that sounds like the kind of feedback or advice you would get from
But
someone who
correction,
didn't know anything. Oh
I
yeah,
never
go ahead.
got my never got my real estate license. Never. I went through the entire course from front to back just because I did not want to have to sign on disclosure that I'm a realtor. I never got my license, but it
So you
took
went through the
myself all the way.
courses, but didn't get the
Correct.
license. Got it, got it. So okay, so get going through the course, to get the education, keep the piece of paper there, but you went through the education side of that, and then from there it was again just really being a sponge, listening to books, podcasts, going to YouTube, all the information you could to educate yourself on real estate investing, learning those terminology, figuring out what DSCR, of course, debt service coverage ratio, and learning all these different things so that you can prepare yourself to do these deals. We were talking about, really standing out with brokers. And when it comes to being a closer, um, you know, there are some folks who are still trying to figure out how to do that. How do I stand out? When you have concerns on a deal, a lot of people they put an offer and they get a little concerned, right? You maybe have that buyer's remorse start to kick in. Talk to us about overcoming that obstacle and closing on those early deals.
I definitely it took me a while to get comfortable. You're searching the web looking for the deal, but if you don't know what a deal looks like, you're essentially looking into oblivion. My first deal was a 33 unit apartment complex. I'm going to say outside of us building a 17,000 square foot office and warehouse, which at that time I didn't care about real estate. I built the office and the warehouse 17,000 square foot based on what my business needed with personnel in our business operations, not because of a real estate investment. It was us as an owner operator of a company. But my first investment was a 33 unit apartment complex. And that was after I put myself through all of this training and trying to build up enough confidence to finally pull the trigger. And even at that, when I did get the rent roll and I found out what the seller was wanting, I knew that I had a deal because I knew what it was truly valued based on its NOI, based on its current rents, in place rents, and its NOI. So I'm not going to say I mistakenly bought it right because I didn't. I knew exactly what was in front of me. But at the time, I mean, that deal, it was off market. If it went on market, it would have never traded at the price that I bought it for.
Yeah, I mean, you had that knowledge built in, right? So you knew what you were looking at, even though you had some trepidation, you still trusted the process. And I think that's really important for people to understand is that you're going to second guess. You're going to have some concerns. You're going to have some questions, but trust the work you've put in as well. If you've read the books, you've listened to the podcast, if you've gone through the training, for some folks going, getting a mentor, getting a coach, whatever it is, trust the process. Like there's a process for a reason, right? You're educating yourself for a reason. And it's always going to be a little scary that first time, but if you double check the things you have, double check the rents, double check the incomes, double check the information you have, that's what due diligence is for. You get through due diligence. Well, now you know you've got that opportunity, right? You've done that deal. And I go back to where you started. Whereas if you're buying based on the actual performance and not this, dream scenario in the future, then you'll be okay. You'll be okay because the property's already cash flowing, right? Now there's an operation standpoint, but you should be in a good position. So let's talk about that more, right? Because you talked about being able to impact 10,000 lives through 10,000 units. You and I know that the operation side is where the rubber really meets the road. And that's where, some of these pro formas fall apart is the inability to execute. As an owner operator, one, what does that mean for to you being an owner operator? And how does that differ from, maybe an owner who buys a property and works with a third party management company?
Okay, well, we started out with third party property management, and in fact we had to because we didn't have the experience to even tell the lender that they were we couldn't close it because we didn't have the experience to manage the property with the lender. I mean, it just can't. You've got to leverage other people's experience, and in that case, we were leveraging property management for a long time. Um, the reason we got into truly vertically integrated owner operator where we were forced into property management because of nefarious activities by a property manager. Her husband was a fiduciary, a broker, and she was stealing tenants' deposits, having them Venmo over. So, and I've got an issue with control. I like control, and I like being in control. So regardless, the property manager that we had hired needed to come into our system. We were using Buildium at the time, and post all the rents and just manage the property out of our system. So, and I say control because as far as all cash accounts being deposits are going into cash accounts that you control, and the property management company is able to access those for posting and reconciling, and even the system so that we can access and pull reports when we want to, whenever we want to. We weren't going into the property management's portal and trying to access reports. They were coming to our portal. But I pulled a report showing what our liability exposure was on deposits. I seen 10 tenants that didn't have deposits, and then that's kind of like when her house of cards fell, and now she's getting litigated on, and her case is compounding because there's other property companies out there that are relying on her services. But that forced us into property management, and the only way we could make it make sense was to take all of our properties in house, not just one, and hire personnel to help support it. But that was by force. We truly didn't want to, and now I'm glad everything happens for you, not to you in a lot of cases. And there's also the adage that this too shall pass. If you use those two notions, you're going to get through it. But in that case, it was happening for us, and now we've got a property management company, and now my mantra is we're going to impact 10,000 lives through property management. Well, that's taking full vertical control of the property of the real estate investment platform. Is part of it is property management.
And Josh, to clarify, you had multiple properties, not just the one. And this person just happened to be on whatever that property was, right? So you decided to pull all of your properties in house after kind of running into this challenge with this one property manager. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, at the time,
Yeah.
because we were building based off of we would come in. Of course, we've got the construction arm, so we would go in and add our value through renovations, not through property management. But we need that level of communication with the property managers for evictions or selecting a rent while we were busy on renovations and managing the project management. But with that, our business changed. Things change. You have to be able to pivot. Entrepreneurs, you have to pivot in your business. You have to make the next best move, and you can't predict it. It comes at you, and it's going. Things are going to continuously happen, and you just have to roll with it and make the best of it, and keep making the best possible moves you can.
What were some of the, not so much challenges, because I can imagine there are a bunch of challenges, but when you decided to make that transition, what was that process like? I mean, how many units did you already have, and what did you need to put in place to successfully transition from, just being kind of that owner working with third party to now being that owner operator yourself?
We were at I think we're around 140 units at that time because and still 140 units is not really it's not enough to well in our opinion it wasn't enough to make property management make sense. But surprisingly enough, you take over your property and you see how many expenses go away just by you controlling the expenses fully instead of relying on third party property management to control your checks for you. So uh, another great move. Properties are now performing even better, even way better than they ever could, just because we're not taking a top line property management share plus expenses plus this plus that. We're not throwing money at problems and hoping they go away and then have to spend money on the same problem. We're fixing the root of the problem, whether it's a maintenance issue or a tenant issue. We're fixing it to for the long term, not just a short term band-aid. That some companies out there will do just to make the problem go away. So it's total control, and we found it's effective because then we feel like our foundation is strong enough to actually start really building off of now.
No, I love it. I think there's great insights on what it takes, right? Because I know the rule of thumb that I heard when I was starting out was, hey, you want to have 1,000 doors before you start trying to, bring property management in house. Just from an economic standpoint, you were able to do this at 140 or so units. So obviously you can do it early in the process. And clearly there are people who self-manage smaller properties and smaller portfolios. But
Yeah,
that's one of those things that I think maybe is a misnomer of when should you actually think about bringing property management in house?
Well, keep in mind though, we had an operating company that was relying on outside cash flow as well. That we had a blend of businesses. So our staff was not only supported by our operating company, but by property. So blending the expenses makes it make sense to where you're not relying solely on one source of income or revenue. So at the time, it would not have made sense for me, if I was just relying on 141 properties as a third party property manager to go out there, it wouldn't work. The fees wouldn't support one person. But since we're a company, we're doing it. It made sense, and we were able to do it successfully.
And when you say that, you're talking about the construction arm or what
Correct.
elements? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we were doing insurance restoration work as well with our construction arm. So we have an operating company, and now that arm is essentially now it's just we solely operate off of purchasing properties, renovating them, and keeping our crews going. We don't look for outside work at all at this point. But that's the transition of businesses. You kind of figure it out as you go, and then what works, keep doing what works. A lot of companies they look, or a lot of people they see the next shiny object and they get distracted on what was actually working, or they see somebody else doing something. Well, they don't realize that that someone else spent 10 years doing that something, and then they want to switch gears. It's constantly switching gears. Go with what's working and just stay consistent. Keep going with what is working for you.
Josh, if you could go back and let's say you were working with someone or you knew someone who had a property of a similar size, let's say 150 units or so, but they did not have their own, construction company and they didn't have those resources and they were faced with a similar predicament that you were in, how would you advise an individual?
Okay, so let me dissect the question. They have 150 units. They do not have construction arm. They do not have a property management arm. Do they have a staff?
Uh, let's say no, just for this. So let's say it's an owner, they're the starting out investor. Maybe they've raised some capital for this deal, but they want to have more control and they're trying to figure out, how they do that.
Okay, well, I guess it's more of going in and setting expectations on the onset. Because if you're being retroactive, it's extremely hard. Because on the onset, you're searching for a property management to take care of the 150 units. So on the onset, I would say you're going to need to operate out of our platform. We control the cash accounts. You can make deposits. You can reconcile if you've got someone, or our team reconciles. I would have them starting out operating under our current operations that we've already got set up. You can still use third party, but they're coming into your universe, your platform, versus you coming into their universe, and you only get to see a peek inside. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I want to play it back though, so others recognize what you're saying. You're saying you kind of still create kind of the infrastructure, right? So whether it be through Buildium, Appfolio, whatever that platform is, you get that, so you have access and control. You bring in that third party management company to plug into your system. Did you get a lot of pushback on that? Because I know we work with a lot of third party managements, and they kind of always have their systems that they build into and ask us
Yes.
to work through that. I imagine you got some pushback, but what was that like?
Well, there's different caliber of property management. So if you've got 150 units that are scattered sites, that's only going to appetize to one type of property management firm. If you've got 150 units on one site, there's going to be a different type of property management firm. And when you get the property management firm that's going to manage the 150 unit on one site, they have access to resources that you couldn't have. You just don't have. They've most likely have asset management managers in house. They have most likely have the full accounting department that for AP and AR. They most likely have the leasing department. They've got workflows set up that have taken them years and years and years to set up, and now they're just plugging your 150 units into their current universe. If you've got a scattered 150 units, you're going to see a property management that ultimately might not even have a system set up. I've met a few that operate off of Excel, which you probably just want to go keep looking at that point.
Your guy had Excel, my guy had pen and paper.
Yeah, one told me he had a custom software, and I built custom software for our other company, and that is a nightmare. And don't ever do it, because if it's on a shelf, you can take it off the shelf and then plug your company into it. use that route. Don't build a custom software. So when he said that, I was like, how's that going for you? I'm thinking, but you want to, I can say just search wisely, keep how you go in on the onset, setting expectations is going to have a lot to do with the success that you get out of it. And I wouldn't recommend anybody uprooting their current career to go venture into real estate. Real estate's still a business. It needs attention like a business does. You need to have acumen like a business owner. Real estate is not a luxury sport that you just sit it and forget it. Um, it just doesn't work. The big sexy mantra of real estate is out on a sailboat by the beach and looking at cash flowing in. It just doesn't work like that. So that's a fairy tale. Just like anything else, just go into it with open eyes, and it's an education all the way. Just keep educating yourself.
Josh, I love what you said and that clarification, the conversation. I don't know if everyone caught the nuances of it, so I want to play it back. What the original question was, hey, if you don't have that construction background or that construction arm of your business or a property management company in your business, and you're in that situation where you've got, 100 to 200 units, so too small really to go create your own property management company in by most people's direction or feedback. But you need to take more ownership. What you said was there's two things you want to look at. And one is how sophisticated is the property management company? Is this a PM company that has, big resources? They have their own portals, they have their own systems, they've got an accounting department that oversees, you said AP and AR, which is accounts receivables and accounts payables. Do they have an asset manager in house? Do they have the resources to help make sure you're getting the best operations out of that property? If so, you probably want to plug into that system, right, until you can scale to the point where you can take more ownership yourself. But if not, if you're more scattered site, meaning you've got, a 20 unit here, a 30 unit here, a 10 unit there, and you're not working with those big property management companies because most of them will not deal with, properties that are under a certain size, typically 50 units, 75 units, 100 units. I called one, I remember a year ago, I was looking at a new market for us, but in our range of the areas we look at, and they said the smallest unit count they would look at is 250 units. So if you can't get some of those companies that have the infrastructure in place, and you're looking to still work with third party, what you suggested was that's when you take the ownership. You create that system, whether it's through Appfolio, Buildium, or whoever else. You create that and then ask that third party property manager to plug into your system. That way you still have control. So I just want to clarify because I think that was a brilliant point. And I'm not sure everyone caught it, but it was a really brilliant point of, hey, who's your partner? If your partner is more experienced, sophisticated, they've got the resources and they can, allow you to tap in and plug into the ecosystem they've already built, and then go that route. And then you can decide whether or not they're the right partner or right fit based on the merits of, their ability to execute that business plan. But if you don't have that and you're really working with people who don't have those kind of resources, then you create that and have them plug into your system. So really, really great insights right there. Ultimately, it comes down to what you talked about before. This takes time. Building takes time. It takes patience. You got to show up every day, but make sure you're thinking about your business the right way, especially if you want to scale and be that owner operator over the long haul. Josh, you've got a couple things. One, you've got a very successful podcast, which I'm excited for, Real Estate Hustlers. So tell us a little bit more about kind of this show and what kind of urged you to start this.
Just more of getting into the heads of other people that have been there and have done it before me and bigger than me. It doesn't matter if you've got 40,000 units, someone else has 41,000 units. That's just there's somebody who's already ahead of you and is already doing it, is already knowing how to get there, and they're more than willing to lend their hand in helping you get there. So if I can create a reason to get in front of them, which was a podcast, then that's it. Real Estate Hustlers was my wife came up with the name. It's a cool name. It's catchy. It makes sense. Where I hustling is in my heart, and I like real estate. So you're a real estate hustler, John. I'm sure you talk about real estate. We probably the same amount. So it's a podcast that was put out there to just hopefully introduce myself to other people that are doing bigger things.
I love it. And this, if you want to check that out, you can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll make sure to put a link to it in our show notes. And also, if you want to learn more about Josh and his company, you can go to appelmancapital.com. That's Appelman, right? Did I
That's
spell that
correct.
right?
Yeah,
Man, I'm sitting here
I've been dealing
questioning
with
myself.
that my entire life.
I was like, I wrote it right. I knew I wrote it right. And then I was like, wait, you just said Appleman. It's gotta be. It's like, all right. Yes. It's Appelman. So not how
Correct.
you write it in school. Okay. The E comes first.
Yeah, spell it
But
wrong.
applemancapital.com. Listen, right now we're gonna transition to our round of insights. You ready?
Sure. I'm ready.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Oh man, wow, that's a good one. So we had my territory got closed in on with a much larger company, and at the time I didn't. I mean, it was this too shall pass, but at what capacity? Because ultimately, it was make a move or a move's going to be made for you. So I built a very large company, and a much larger company was coming in town, and they were only after what we had built up. But that ultimately propelled me into real estate. I wanted to get into something to where my light switch cannot be turned off by someone else. It can't. If you build it up, you build it to just be there, and someone else relies on you, like real estate. It's bricks, and you put as much heart, effort, and energy into building that up, and someone else can't just come and take something away from you. That's what I was looking for. Real estate's proven to be that model.
Give me a digital or a mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I would say the Miracle Morning has been instrumental. Waking up at 4 a.m., doing your manifestations, doing your growth driving activities, writing down what you want in the future, setting goals, setting initiatives. Every morning we meet. Miracle Morning kind of gives me a purpose just to track. Not that you get into the rhythm, you keep things going, but it's a cool app. It plug in and keep moving.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I would say Turning Pro. It goes over what mediocre is versus what pro is. It gives you insights. There's also the book The Four Agreements. I would recommend that to anybody. My kids, they've listened to it through the car rides. And rule number 2: don't take anything personally.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
It's definitely waking up at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. That morning routine keeps me in line with what my 10-year plan is.
All right, give me your number one insight for scaling a multifamily portfolio.
I don't. I thought that the big thing was to syndicate and to get as many units as possible. That to me is not it anymore. It's what do you have at the end of the day for your efforts? You can close 200 unit apartment complex and truly own 2.5 units, and that's just it. So what have you scaled? You just scaled someone else's real estate portfolio, and you're doing all the work. It's more about growing organically and working at a model that supports you, your family, and what you want that to look like for your long-term vision, whether it's 10, 20, what does it look like down the road? Not necessarily what it looks like for somebody else.
And you are in the Cincinnati market with me. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh man, we just moved our office here to downtown Cincinnati, so Jeff Ruby's is always good. It never disappoints. Bourbon Barrel's right down the road. They've got great food. We're still learning the area. There's a ton here. I mean, it's great.
A lot of great options there. I'll give you a couple more offline here that I like, but I don't get down there quite as much, but I got a couple places I do like. Lots of great information today, Josh. You talked about really your journey and, getting into real estate, the patience that it took you to grow and scale and build that trust, studying and taking all the real estate course, not getting the license, but doing all the work, right, to learn and educate, to prepare yourself to do deals. And that first deal is a 33 unit. So for those of you who maybe are a little apprehensive of getting into multifamily in your first deal, it can be done, right? There's definitely ways of doing it. But I loved how you talked about how you're doing deals in this market, recognizing that you've got to place a greater emphasis on kind of the in-place cash flow and understanding that, this is a long-term hold. You got to play the long-term game and not necessarily look to be in and out in 2, 3 years. That's going to give you more opportunities than if you're looking more short-sighted. Again, for folks who want to learn more about your company, they can go to appelmancapital.com. That's APPELMAN capital.com. Josh, thank you again for coming on the show today. Being a great guest. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.